Las Vegas, summer of 2000. The city was alive in the way only Las Vegas can be, neon bleeding into the desert sky, the hum of air conditioners, and the hypnotic sound of slot machines spinning endlessly. Tourists walked the strip, dazzled by the bright lights, but just a few blocks away, in a smaller locals casino far from the main stage, a man was finishing his shift. His name was Daniel Harper, 34 years old. A maintenance technician, the kind of person most patrons never noticed, but whose work kept the machines running, the doors closing, the floors safe. He wasn't wealthy, wasn't famous, just another resident of a city that devours routine. Daniel's life was simple: a modest apartment, a reliable but aging sedan, a sister he called regularly, and a mother who still expected his Sunday visits. On June 12, 2000, Daniel clocked in for another night shift at the casino. It was an unremarkable evening. Faulty bill validators, jammed coin hoppers, the kinds of small fixes that filled his nights. Security cameras caught him walking the floor, blue work shirt tucked in, name patch stitched neatly. D. Harper. A few employees recalled fleeting moments. A bartender remembered Daniel moving a broken stool out of the way. A cocktail waitress remembered his quiet smile. The security guard remembered him waving briefly toward the overhead camera in the employee corridor, a small gesture as he left through the back door. That was the last confirmed sighting of him alive. Daniel should have walked across the back lot to his car, driven 10 minutes home, and fallen into the rhythm of another ordinary night. Instead, his car remained in the same spot the next morning, untouched. Inside were his tools, a folded newspaper, and a soda in the cup holder, condensation long evaporated under the desert heat. When he failed to answer his sister Maria's late-night call, she assumed he was working overtime. By mid-morning, when he didn't show up at his part-time job at a supply warehouse, she drove to the casino herself. The manager assured her he would look into it. Hours later, Maria filed a missing persons report. Detectives with Metro PD opened the case quickly, but their first leads evaporated almost as soon as they appeared. The casino's camera system offered only fragments: Daniel leaving through the employee door, stepping into the dark, then vanishing as he crossed out of frame. No signs of struggle, no second figure, no vehicle pulling away, just absence. His apartment showed no evidence of planning. Rent check on the counter, laundry on a chair, a note on the fridge. Oil change, Friday. His bank accounts remained untouched. His car keys were missing, but the car itself was still sitting in the lot. Theories emerged almost immediately. Maybe Daniel owed someone money. Maybe he was involved in something hidden from his family. Maybe he'd simply walked away. But those who knew him dismissed these ideas. Daniel wasn't a gambler. He wasn't in debt. He lived with a schedule that could be predicted to the minute. Police canvassed the area. Flyers went up across Las Vegas. Local news covered the disappearance briefly, just long enough to generate a handful of unreliable tips. Someone claimed to have seen him at a bus stop. Another insisted he'd been talking with a stranger. None of the leads held. Weeks passed. The casino replaced old carpets, swapped out aging slot machines, and carried on as though nothing had happened. Daniel's name faded from conversations. His family, though, refused to let go. His sister Maria called detectives weekly, her voice steady but increasingly strained. His mother left the porch light on every night, just in case. By the end of the year, the file was quietly marked inactive. A missing man in Las Vegas was hardly rare, and Daniel's case slid into the growing stack of cold files. Still, one detail lingered, largely unnoticed. On the service log from his last shift, Daniel had signed off a machine, Unit 27B, as out of order until morning. It was a minor note, the kind that filled hundreds of pages of maintenance records. No one realized then that this small annotation would later connect to one of the most disturbing discoveries the city had ever seen. That night in 2000, Daniel Harper stepped out of a casino into the dark and was never seen alive again. For 12 years, his absence was nothing more than a question mark, a gap in time that no one could close. In the first 48 hours, hope was still alive. The family gathered in Maria's small living room, maps spread across the coffee table, phones ringing with calls that never seemed to lead anywhere. Detectives assured them that missing adults often reappeared within days, sometimes embarrassed, sometimes with simple explanations. But as each hour passed, that reassurance rang more hollow. Daniel's car was still sitting in the casino lot, a layer of desert dust beginning to settle on the windshield. Officers examined it closely. No signs of forced entry, no damage, no indication of a struggle. His toolbox was in the trunk, untouched. His wallet and driver's license were gone, but his bank account remained inactive. Even his last paycheck was unclaimed. Police canvassed the neighborhood near his apartment. Neighbors recalled nothing unusual. No loud arguments, no strange vehicles, no late-night visitors. At the casino, investigators questioned staff. Most shrugged, insisting they had noticed nothing out of the ordinary. A few repeated vague recollections, but nothing pointed to where Daniel might have gone. Flyers soon appeared on lampposts, bus shelters, and the entrances of grocery stores. Missing person, Daniel Harper. Last seen, June 12, 2000. His photograph, clipped from a family snapshot, showed him standing in front of a barbecue grill, smiling faintly into the camera. The image circulated on local news for several days. Viewers phoned in tips, sightings at a gas station, at a bus terminal, even one caller who claimed to have seen him boarding a Greyhound heading east. Each was followed up. None were real. Detectives considered possible motives. Some leaned toward the idea of voluntary disappearance. Las Vegas was a transient city, they argued, and people reinvented themselves here all the time. Others suspected foul play, maybe a dispute with a patron, maybe something connected to casino operations. But when records were pulled, there were no debts, no criminal ties, no hidden relationships. Maria pushed back against the idea that her brother had left willingly. She reminded investigators of his routines, the rent checks paid on time, the weekly calls, the unopened stack of mail. He wasn't a drifter, she told reporters outside the police substation. If he could come home, he would. For weeks, search parties combed the desert edges of the valley. Volunteers in reflective vests walked shoulder to shoulder through dry brush, calling his name under the heavy sun. Helicopters scanned ravines and drainage washes. K-9 units swept parking lots and alleys. The city seemed to swallow every effort. Months passed. Detectives rotated off the case, reassigned to newer files. The trail went cold. By autumn, Daniel's disappearance was rarely mentioned in the news. Other stories pushed it aside. New casinos opening, celebrity scandals, violent crimes that demanded attention. At home, however, silence filled the air. His mother kept setting a place for him at Sunday dinners. His sister left messages on his pager long after service was disconnected. The absence pressed down harder than any answer could have. The official investigation slowed to a crawl. Leads were exhausted, interviews repeated, evidence boxed and stored. In December 2000, the case file was labeled inactive, but for Maria, inactivity was impossible. She visited the casino herself, standing near the row of machines Daniel had once repaired. To her, the blinking lights and ringing bells were cruel. Life moving on as though her brother had never existed. She asked the floor manager if she could see the surveillance tapes again. He shook his head. The system automatically recorded over old footage after 90 days. The only surviving fragments were the ones detectives had already seen. Daniel leaving through the back exit, stepping into the dark, then nothing. In January 2001, she contacted a private investigator with money borrowed from relatives. He reviewed the case and agreed. Nothing suggested Daniel had left willingly. "Somebody knows something," he told her, "but this city buries secrets deep." By the time the first anniversary of Daniel's disappearance arrived, the family had grown used to unanswered questions. Candlelight vigils were held, prayers spoken, stories shared about his quiet humor and steady reliability. Yet beneath the surface lingered fear. Fear that Daniel was out there somewhere, unseen, unheard, unable to return. And so the years began to stack. One by one, they fell into the long silence that swallows so many unresolved cases in Las Vegas. But hidden among the casino's aging infrastructure, buried in storage rooms and outdated machines, a piece of the truth still waited. 12 years is a long time for a family to live inside a question. Birthdays passed. Apartments changed hands. The small casino where Daniel had worked closed its doors in 2008. The sign taken down, the carpet rolled up, the building eventually repurposed. Somewhere in the paperwork of that shutdown was a line item that meant nothing to anyone then. Surplus equipment, slot machines, mixed condition, to storage. Maria kept calling anyway. On anniversaries, she'd dial the same number at Metro PD, ask the same measured question, and hear the same careful answers. Leads had been checked. DNA was on file. If anything surfaced, they would call. She lit a candle each June and tucked the burned match into an envelope with Daniel's name on it. The envelope grew heavier while the case stayed light. In the spring of 2012, a liquidation company took over a dry, low-slung warehouse on the edge of the valley. Inside were rows of items from several shuttered properties: bar stools, neon letters, outdated surveillance monitors, and dozens of gaming cabinets, shrink-wrapped in dust. A new manager was told to prepare everything for auction. Some machines would be stripped for parts. Others would be sold as curiosities to collectors who liked the sound of spinning reels in their garages. On a Tuesday morning, 2 workers rolled a pallet jack down an aisle and tried to move 3 older cabinets from the same lot. The first 2 slid with a metallic groan. The third didn't. It was heavier than its siblings, not by a little, but by a lot, and it rocked strangely when they tried to lift it. One of the men joked that it was the lucky one, still full of coins after all these years. The manager, who'd heard every joke the industry could muster, frowned and told them to open it before someone hurt their back. They cut the wrap, unbolted a rear panel, and eased it free. A stale, sealed-up odor thinned into the room. Behind wiring harnesses and an empty coin hopper, in a cavity never meant to hold anything but air, was a shape no one expected to see. The room went silent in a way bright places rarely do. A phone call was made, then another. By mid-afternoon, the warehouse was ringed with tape. Detectives moved cautiously around the machine with gloved hands and careful voices. A forensic tech photographed every angle, every screw, every label. The cabinet's serial plate said it had been installed in 1996 and removed from service in 2000. A faded service sticker on the side read, barely legible under grime, 27B. Piece by piece, the cavity gave up what it had been asked to keep. Skeletal remains, fragments of clothing that had once been a work shirt, a small metal keyring bearing a stamped locker tag, 2414. In the coin tray, wedged behind a bracket, a folded strip torn from a maintenance log, a date, a pair of initials, DH, and the note everyone had forgotten. Offline until morning. No one said the name out loud, not at first. They didn't have to. News reached Maria only after the department confirmed chain of custody. A detective she knew by first name called and asked if she could come down to the station. She sat in a small room with neutral walls and listened to sentences that moved like careful furniture. A discovery at a storage facility. Remains recovered. Identification pending. She nodded because there was nothing else to do. When they asked for dental records, She handed over a thin envelope she had kept for years, for precisely this moment. Identification didn't take long. Dental matched first. DNA followed. The key tag matched the locker number still listed in an old HR file from the defunct casino. The remains found inside the slot machine were Daniel Harper. The story broke before sunset and ran wide by dawn. Las Vegas man missing since 2000, found hidden inside slot machine. The headline felt unreal, like a rumor the city would invent about itself. But this time, the rumor was a record, sealed in a cabinet and wheeled from one address to another for 12 quiet years. Detectives traced the machine's path backward. It had been taken offline the night Daniel disappeared and wheeled into a back room for parts and repair. Months later, it was palletized with other outdated units, shipped to a third-party warehouse when the casino upgraded its floor, and then folded into the larger liquidation when the property finally closed. No one had a good reason for why it hadn't been scrapped. Luck, neglect, a missed line on an inventory sheet. The city is fluent in all three. The obvious questions came fast and in sequence. How does a person end up inside a cabinet like that? Could someone have hidden him there? Could it have been an accident? A terrible convergence of maintenance work and a machine never meant to be a container? Investigators answered the only way responsible people can when the evidence is thinner than the questions. They would review, test, reconstruct. They would not guess. For Maria, answers mattered less than the plain, heavy fact. Daniel was no longer a gap in time. He had been here, within driving distance, sealed inside an object the city considers ordinary. She stood by the back door of the station with a styrofoam cup and watched traffic slide along the expressway. The detective joined her and apologized for the years between then and now. She told him that knowing is different than not knowing, even when knowing hurts. In the warehouse, the rest of the cabinets were cataloged and moved. The aisle where the discovery had been made stayed empty a while longer, scuffed wheel marks fading as weeks passed. A single rectangle of dust on the concrete showed where 27B had stood. The manager kept walking past it, slower than before, because some patches of floor are hard to step over the same way again. The case file that had been marked inactive was reopened with a new heading and a new stack of forms. Tests were ordered. Old interviews were reread. Names that had once been just lines in a notebook were called again. Across town, in a small house with a lamp always left on, an envelope of burned matchsticks finally stopped getting heavier. 12 years had turned a person into absence. A warehouse key and a maintenance note turned absence back into a person. And in a city that measures everything by what it keeps spinning, one machine had been still long enough to tell the truth. The announcement landed with the quiet weight of a verdict. For 12 years, Daniel Harper had been a question mark. Now there was an answer, only it didn't behave like one. The discovery closed a search, but it opened an argument no one could finish. The department briefed the press carefully. Identification confirmed. Evidence secured. A review of property records showed the machine's path from casino floor to back room to warehouse. The public heard the hard outline and filled the rest with stories of their own. Talk radio turned it into a riddle. Comment sections did what they always do. On the strip, the lights blinked as if nothing had changed at all. For the family, everything had changed. Maria walked out of the coroner's office into the late light and felt the strange gravity of finality. She had wanted the phone to ring for 12 years. Now she wanted to put it away. In interviews, she kept her voice steady, the way she had learned to do. "We're grateful to know," she said, "and we're asking for space while the investigation continues." What she didn't say, what didn't fit into a soundbite, was that knowing how little they could know was its own kind of ache. Investigators worked the machine like a scene and a timeline at the same time. They photographed the cabinet seams, logged every fastener, measured scuffs inside the hollow and along the back panel. Tool marks were compared. Some screws were factory correct. Others looked replaced sometime around the turn of the millennium. Slots chewed by a hurried hand. Heat and time had erased almost everything else that might speak. No viable prints, no fibers that told a useful story, no residue that changed the math. 12 summers in a sealed box will edit evidence with a ruthless hand. Two theories rose above the rest, neither strong enough to stand without the other. Theory 1, an accident, an impossible one that still happens. Techs work with cabinets open. When a hopper jams or a bill validator fails, you open the back, lean in, and go elbow deep into a dark maze of brackets and harnesses. Doors are heavy. Locks are unforgiving. If a person climbed in further, testing a chute, reaching past a bracket, and the door swung or was pulled closed, a lock could do what locks do. A cabinet isn't made for air. Noise and neon drown out almost anything. The note on the log, offline until morning, would explain the rest. Wheel it to the back, tag it, deal with it after shift. Except no one did. And by then, the machine looked like what it had always looked like, just another box. Theory 2, a hiding place made on purpose. Las Vegas runs on routines, service corridors, camera blind spots, forklifts that move pallets at 2 in the morning. If someone wanted to make a person disappear without leaving the building, a decommissioned cabinet in a quiet aisle would be a bad idea, unless the goal wasn't to hide a crime forever, but to move a problem past the moment when anyone would notice. A machine marked 27B, logged as out of order, rolled behind a door, labeled employees only, and later buried in a shipment of outdated units headed to storage. That's a path with fewer eyes than the parking lot. Detectives did what responsible people have to do when the past won't cooperate. They reconstructed what could be reconstructed. They rolled a matching model into a lab and measured clearances. Could a person fit? Yes. Could a person close it from the inside? Unclear. Could a second person close it from the outside without leaving a trace that still mattered 12 years later? Also unclear. They interviewed the old night crew again, one by one. The security guard from 2000 had retired to Arizona. The floor manager swore he remembered nothing but carpet patterns. A former slot tech said he hated that aisle because the air never moved. Everyone remembered a different detail. Memory is a poor notary. The coroner's report gave the edges, and nothing past them. Remains consistent with the elapsed time. No trauma that could survive the desert's calendar. No toxins that hadn't already evaporated. Manner of death. Undetermined. It looked clinical on paper. It didn't feel clinical at all. In the absence of certainties, the human mind makes its own. Some people in Daniel's orbit argued for accident. It matched his job, his temperament, his habit of staying late to finish what he'd started. Others could not accept a scenario that depended so heavily on coincidence and silence. They pointed to the locker tag, the service note, the way the machine had vanished into a process designed to forget. They used words like placed and hidden and left the rest unsaid. Maria avoided the arguments. She planned a small service and invited the few people who still said his name easily. In the back of the room, on a table with a plain cloth, she set a photo of Daniel from years before. Not a portrait, just him laughing at a backyard grill, sunlight on his sleeve. She spoke briefly about routine and kindness and the way a person can hold a place in a family even when that place is empty. After, she boxed up the flyers she had saved and the pen she had used to write dates on the corners. There would be no more new dates to add. The department kept the case open on paper, a fact that comforted and frustrated in equal measure. Leads that once thinned to nothing were checked one more time. Tips came in after the news coverage and lapsed just as quickly. The warehouse manager changed how his team logged weights on incoming cabinets. A memo went out citywide, reminding properties how long to preserve service videos and maintenance logs. Procedures shifted in small, unglamorous ways, the only kind that stick. What remained, after the briefings and the headlines and the lab reports, was a city doing what it always does, moving forward with a secret lodged somewhere in its machinery. You could walk into any local's casino on a Tuesday afternoon and hear the same lullaby of spinning reels. You could stand in a back hallway and feel the dead air of a closed door. You could pass a storage yard on the edge of town and not notice a single thing. Daniel Harper's story doesn't end with an answer. It ends with a panel unscrewed, a note we should have read more closely, a machine that stopped singing long enough to be heard. 12 years turned a life into absence. One ordinary Tuesday turned absence back into a life with a name. The rest will live where most Las Vegas stories live, in the space between what the cameras see and what the city chooses to remember.